The Castellano mansion loomed before me like something out of a Gothic novel. All stone and sharp angles, surrounded by manicured gardens that probably required a full staff just to maintain. I stood at the service entrance clutching my worn purse, trying to calm the nervous flutter in my stomach. I was 26 years old, 3 months behind on rent, and this job was my last option before eviction became reality. Mrs. Vanetti, the head housekeeper, opened the door with an expression that made it clear she'd seen 1,000 desperate women like me walk through this entrance. She was somewhere in her 60s, hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that missed nothing. "You're the new girl," she said, not a question. "Lara Bennett?" "Yes, ma'am." "You'll address Mr. Castellano as sir, Mrs. Castellano as ma'am. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not ask questions about what you see or hear in this house. You clean what you're told to clean, and you forget everything else. Understood?" I nodded, following her through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The mansion was situated 40 minutes outside the city center, isolated enough that you couldn't hear traffic, only birds and wind through the trees. Everything inside screamed wealth, from the marble floors to the crystal chandeliers, the kind of opulence I'd only seen in magazines. "You'll start in the East Wing," Mrs. Vanetti continued, her heels clicking against the floor. "Formal dining room needs to be ready by 6. That gives you 4 hours. 4 hours seemed reasonable until I saw the room. It was massive, with a table that could seat 20 people, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a chandelier with what had to be 1,000 crystals. I got to work immediately, grateful just to have something to do, somewhere to be that wasn't my cramped apartment where Ruby was probably driving Mrs. Walsh crazy. My daughter, 4 years old with my eyes and my curls, the only good thing that came from the worst relationship of my life. I'd left Jake 2 years ago after he'd made it clear that his love came with conditions and consequences. The scars on my back were proof of that, textured white lines from cigarette burns that I kept hidden under long sleeves even in summer heat. I was polishing the already spotless table when I heard voices approaching. 2 people, a man and woman, their tones sharp with barely concealed hostility. "You're being ridiculous," the woman said, her accent cultured and cold. "I'm being practical," the man responded, his voice deeper, measured. "The Harrington deal requires my full attention, not social theatrics." They entered the dining room, and I immediately pressed myself against the far wall, trying to become invisible. The woman was stunning, blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her blue eyes swept over me with the kind of dismissal usually reserved for insects. The man was different. Vincent Castellano, I realized, recognizing him from the single photo Mrs. Vanetti had shown me during the brief orientation. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with black hair pushed back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, and eyes so dark brown they looked almost black in the dim light. There was a thin scar on his right temple, barely visible, but present. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, and when those eyes landed on me, I forgot how to breathe. "You," the woman said, snapping her fingers at me like I was a dog. "What's your name?" "Lara, ma'am." "Well, Lara, you missed a spot on the window. There." She pointed to a pane of glass that was clearly spotless. I moved to clean it anyway, knowing better than to argue. As I worked, I could feel Vincent's gaze on me, assessing in a way that made my skin prickle with awareness. "She's new?" he asked Mrs. Vanetti, who had appeared in the doorway. "Started today, Mr. Castellano." He nodded once, then turned to the blonde woman. "Sophia, we'll continue this conversation later." "Of course," she said, but there was ice in her tone. "I have a charity luncheon anyway. Try not to work yourself to death while I'm gone." She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and the atmosphere in the room immediately lightened. Vincent remained, however, watching me with an intensity that made my hands shake slightly as I cleaned the imaginary spot on the window. "How old is your daughter?" he asked suddenly. I nearly dropped the cloth. "Excuse me?" "Your daughter. The dependent listed on your employment paperwork. How old is she?" 4, I managed, wondering why he would care, why he would even look at my paperwork. "Her name is Ruby." "And who watches her while you're here?" "A neighbor, sir. He was quiet for a long moment, and when I finally dared to glance at him, his expression was unreadable. "The work Mrs. Vanetti assigns you, is it manageable?" "Yes, sir. If that changes, you'll inform me directly." Before I could respond, he left, leaving me confused and more than a little unsettled. In my experience, powerful men didn't concern themselves with the child care arrangements of their housekeepers. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into a rhythm. Wake at 5, get Ruby ready, drop her at Mrs. Walsh's apartment by 6:30, catch 2 buses to reach the mansion by 8, work until 6, sometimes 7 if there was an event, reverse the journey, pick up Ruby, make dinner from whatever we had in the nearly empty refrigerator, tuck her into bed, and collapse into my own. Sophia Castellano made sure those weeks were memorable for all the wrong reasons. She found fault with everything I did. The floors weren't clean enough. The silver wasn't polished properly. I'd moved a decorative pillow 2 inches from its original position. Each criticism came with a threat, spoken or implied, that my employment hung by a thread. But I also noticed things, like how Vincent and Sophia barely spoke to each other outside of necessary social interactions, how they slept in separate wings of the mansion, how Sophia's eyes would linger on him with something that looked like longing mixed with resentment, while he looked at her with nothing at all. And I noticed how Vincent's path seemed to cross mine more frequently. He'd appear in the library while I was dusting, supposedly looking for a book. He'd walk through the kitchen while I was helping prepare afternoon tea, claiming he wanted coffee. Once I was sorting his bookshelves by author as Mrs. Vanetti had instructed, and he watched me work for nearly 10 minutes before commenting that most people organized them by color or size. "I always thought author made more sense," I'd said without thinking, then immediately regretted speaking out of turn. But he'd just nodded, a slight curve to his lips that might have been approval. The day everything changed started ordinarily. I was assigned to the formal dining room again, tasked with preparing it for an important dinner. 8 guests, Sophia had informed me coldly, and everything needed to be perfect. She'd emphasized that last word, making it clear that perfect was a standard I would inevitably fail to meet. I was setting the final placement when it happened. Reaching across the table to adjust a wine glass, my hip bumped the edge of a side table. The Ming vase sitting on it wobbled, and despite my desperate grab for it, crashed to the marble floor in an explosion of ancient porcelain. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. My blood turned to ice. That vase had been there since my first day, and I'd been so careful around it, knowing instinctively that it was valuable beyond my comprehension. Sophia appeared within seconds, her face lighting up with something that looked disturbingly like triumph. "Do you have any idea what you've just destroyed?" "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to. That vase was a genuine Ming Dynasty piece, 12th century, worth approximately $12,000. She crossed her arms, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. "That will come out of your salary, of course. Let's see, you make what? $1,500 a month. That means you'll be working for free for the next 8 months. Unless you'd prefer to be terminated immediately and sued for the full amount." I couldn't breathe. 8 months without pay meant eviction, meant Ruby going hungry, meant losing everything. "I'll work," I whispered, because what choice did I have? "I thought you might say that." Sophia's smile was razor sharp. "Clean up this mess. And Lara, be more careful in the future. I'd hate for another accident to extend your servitude." She walked away, heels clicking against marble, and I dropped to my knees among the shattered porcelain, trying desperately not to cry. My hands shook as I picked up pieces, and I didn't hear him approach until Vincent's voice cut through my panic. "Leave it." I looked up to find him standing over me, his face carved from stone, eyes blazing with barely controlled fury, but not directed at me, I realized. He was looking at the doorway where Sophia had disappeared. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for it. I said leave it." He reached down, and I flinched instinctively, a reflex from older wounds. He froze, jaw tightening, but his hand remained extended. "Let me help you up." Hesitantly, I took his hand. His grip was firm but careful, and he pulled me to my feet with effortless strength. "The vase was poorly positioned," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "I placed it there myself this morning. The fault is mine." not yours. But Mrs. Castellano said, "My wife does not determine financial matters in this household. I do." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "You will receive this month's salary as usual, plus a bonus for the inconvenience. The vase will be replaced with insurance money, and we will not speak of this again." "Sir, I can't accept." His eyes met mine, and the intensity there stole my breath. "Yes, you can, and you will. Because in this house, Lara, I decide what's acceptable. Not Sophia, not anyone else. Is that understood?" I nodded, unable to form words. "Good." He glanced down at the broken porcelain, then back at me. "Send someone else to clean this. Take the rest of the day off. You look exhausted." He left before I could thank him, before I could process what had just happened. Vincent Castellano, one of the most powerful men in the city, had just protected me from his own wife's cruelty. And the way he'd looked at me, like I mattered, like I was more than just another disposable employee, terrified me more than Sophia's threats ever could. Because I'd learned long ago that when powerful men took interest in broken women like me, someone always ended up bleeding, usually me. After the vase incident, Vincent's presence became impossible to ignore, not because he sought me out overtly, but because he seemed to appear wherever I was working with excuses that grew increasingly transparent. I was in the library organizing his collection by author, a task Mrs. Vanetti had assigned that would take days. The room smelled of leather and old paper, sunlight streaming through tall windows. I'd found a rhythm, moving from shelf to shelf, occasionally pausing to admire a first edition or rare binding. Without thinking, I started humming quietly, an old song my mother used to sing. "You have good taste." Vincent's voice came from the doorway, and I nearly dropped the book in my hands. "Mr. Castellano, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were there." He walked into the library, hands in his pockets, observing my work. "Most people would organize these by color, make them decorative rather than functional. That seems pointless," I said, then caught myself. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" "No, you're right. It is pointless." He pulled a book from the shelf I'd just organized, a worn copy of something in Italian. "My mother taught me to read with stories. She believed books should be used, not displayed. It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared, and I didn't know how to respond." We stood in silence for a moment, the air between us charged with something I didn't want to name. "The song you were humming," he continued, replacing the book carefully. "Where's it from?" "My mother used to sing it, before she died." His dark eyes studied me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "How old were you?" 16. He nodded slowly, and I had the strange sense that he understood loss in a way most people didn't. Then he left without another word, leaving me confused and unsettled in equal measure. The next day, I found groceries in the staff pantry. Good groceries, fresh produce, quality meat, pasta, things I couldn't afford on my salary. There was a note taped to the bag. "Available for anyone who needs it. No questions asked." Mrs. Vanetti caught me staring at it. "Mr. Castellano's orders," she said quietly. "He does this sometimes. You're not required to take anything, but nobody will judge if you do." I took the bag home that night, and for the first time in months, Ruby had a full meal. She ate pasta with actual meat sauce, fresh vegetables, and fruit for dessert. Watching her eat until she was satisfied rather than just no longer hungry made my chest ache with gratitude, and something more complicated. Vincent was buying my loyalty, I told myself. This was strategy, not kindness. Powerful men didn't do things without expecting something in return. But then my paycheck arrived, and it was 40% higher than expected. When I asked Mrs. Vanetti about the error, she'd simply said, "No error. Mr. Castellano adjusted wages for efficient workers." I should have been grateful. Instead, I felt trapped, because every kindness was another thread in a web I couldn't see clearly, and I'd learned the hard way that invisible webs were the most dangerous. Sophia noticed the shift immediately. She'd always been cold to me, but after Vincent's interventions, her cruelty took on a sharper edge. She started assigning impossible tasks, demanding I clean the entire West Wing in 2 hours, or polish silver that didn't need polishing until my fingers cramped. The worst came during a dinner party. I was serving drinks to guests in the formal living room, trying to be invisible as Mrs. Vanetti had taught me. Sophia was holding court, beautiful in a sapphire dress, laughing at something a politician's wife had said. Then her eyes landed on me, and her expression turned calculating. "Lara," she called out, her voice carrying across the room. "Come here." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, but I crossed to where she sat, aware of a dozen sets of eyes tracking my movement. "Everyone, this is Lara," Sophia announced, wrapping an arm around my waist in a gesture that might have looked affectionate to observers, but felt like a trap. "She's my husband's latest charity project. Vincent has such a soft heart for strays." Laughter rippled through the guests, polite and uncomfortable. Heat flooded my face. "He's very generous," I managed, trying to extract myself from her grip. "Oh, he is," Sophia agreed, her fingers digging into my side hard enough to bruise. "Sometimes I worry he's too generous, that people might take advantage of his kindness." "You wouldn't do that, would you, Lara?" "No, ma'am." "Good girl." She released me suddenly, and I nearly stumbled. "You can go now. I'm sure you have floors to scrub or something equally important." I fled, humiliation burning through me, and didn't stop until I reached the kitchen. Maria and June, 2 other housekeepers, watched me with sympathy, but said nothing. What could they say? We all knew our place in this house, and it wasn't anywhere near equal to Sofia Castellano. I managed to avoid everyone for the rest of the evening, staying busy in the kitchen until the guests left. It was past 11 when Mrs. Vanetti finally dismissed me, but I needed a moment alone before facing the bus ride home. I slipped into the pantry, closed the door, and let myself fall apart. The crying came quietly, years of practice teaching me how to sob without making noise. I pressed my hands against my face, trying to hold the pieces together, but exhaustion and humiliation cracked my control. I was so tired of being scared, tired of being broke, tired of being treated like I was worthless. "Lara?" I jerked my head up to find Vincent standing in the pantry doorway. His jacket gone, tie loosened, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. Concern etched lines around his dark eyes. "I'm fine," I lied, wiping hastily at my face. "Just tired." He closed the door behind him, and suddenly the small space felt even smaller. What my wife said earlier was inexcusable. She's right, though, isn't she? I am your charity case. No. His voice was firm, final. You're an employee who works harder than anyone else in this house. What I choose to pay you is my business, not hers. I laughed, a broken sound. Is that why you're here? To make sure your investment doesn't break down? I'm here because I heard you crying and couldn't walk away. He leaned against the shelf, studying me in the dim light. Talk to me, Lara. What's really wrong? Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the genuine concern in his voice, so different from what I was used to. Whatever the reason, I found myself talking. Mrs. Walsh raised her rate to $75 a week. I can't afford it. Not with rent and utilities and food. But I can't lose her either, because there's no other childcare I can afford. And without childcare, I can't work. The words tumbled out faster. Ruby needs new shoes because she's growing so fast. The landlord says if I'm late again, he's filing eviction. And I know I should be grateful because this job is better than anything else I could find. But I'm drowning, and I don't know how to stop. Vincent listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finally fell silent, he asked quietly, "Ruby's father, where is he?" My hand instinctively went to my shoulder, where the worst scar from Jake's knife still pulled tight when I moved wrong. Gone. He didn't want a daughter, and he made that very clear. "The scars on your arms," Vincent said, and I realized he'd noticed me always wearing long sleeves despite the heat. "He gave you those. It wasn't a question." I nodded anyway. "His name. It doesn't matter anymore. I got a restraining order, and he hasn't bothered us in 2 years." Vincent's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking near his temple. It matters to me. The possessiveness in those words should have frightened me. Instead, warmth spread through my chest, dangerous and intoxicating. "Why do you care?" I whispered. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "When I was 12, My mother got pneumonia. My father refused to call a doctor because he said it showed weakness to care too much about a woman. She died 3 days later in their bedroom, and I listened to her struggle for breath the entire time. Too young to help, too terrified of him to try. The admission hung between us, raw and painful. I swore that day I would never be him, that I would never have the power to help someone and choose not to use it. His eyes met mine. You and Ruby need help. I have the resources to provide it. That's all this is. But we both knew it was more than that. The air between us crackled with unspoken tension, and I became acutely aware of how close he was, how his presence filled the small space. The pantry door opened suddenly, and Sophia stood there, her face a mask of ice. How domestic. The master and the maid, alone in the pantry at midnight. Vincent straightened, his expression going cold. Lara was organizing supplies. We were discussing household inventory. Of course you were. Sophia's gaze raked over me with contempt. Lara, you're dismissed. I'm sure you have a bus to catch. I fled gratefully, but not before catching the fury in Vincent's eyes as he turned to face his wife. Their voices followed me down the corridor, low and vicious. You will not speak to her that way again. Or what, Vincent? You'll divorce me? We both know you can't afford to break the agreement with my family. There are limits, Sophia, even to what I'll tolerate for politics. Then perhaps you should stop giving me reasons to be jealous. I didn't hear his response, but her bitter laugh echoed through the empty halls long after I'd left. That night, lying in my narrow bed with Ruby asleep beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about Vincent's words, about the boy who'd watched his mother die, and the man who'd become someone powerful enough to prevent others from suffering the same fate. About the way he'd looked at me in that pantry, like I was something precious rather than broken. I told myself it meant nothing, that come morning, everything would return to normal. But when I arrived at work the next day, Mrs. Vanetti handed me an envelope containing information about a private preschool that had miraculously offered Ruby a full scholarship. Vincent's doing, obviously, another thread in his web. And despite every warning bell in my head, I was starting to wonder if being caught might not be the worst thing that could happen to me. Ruby's cough started on a Tuesday morning, wet and rattling in her small chest. By Wednesday afternoon, she was burning with fever, her face flushed and eyes glazed. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before, but my phone had been disconnected 3 days earlier when I couldn't pay the bill. There was no way to let Mrs. Vanetti know. I spent 2 days in our cramped apartment, watching my daughter struggle to breathe, giving her children's medicine from the dollar store that barely touched her fever. On Thursday morning, she was worse, wheezing with every breath, and panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't afford a doctor, not a real one. The free clinic had a 3-week waiting list, and the emergency room would cost thousands I didn't have. So I did what desperate mothers do. I held her and prayed and tried not to think about Vincent's mother dying while his father refused to help. Friday morning, someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened it cautiously to find a man in an expensive suit, late 50s with kind eyes and a leather medical bag. Ms. Bennett, I'm Dr. Howard. Mr. Castellano sent me to check on your daughter. I should have asked how Vincent knew where I lived, how he knew Ruby was sick. Instead, I let the doctor inside, relief overwhelming every other emotion. Dr. Howard examined Ruby thoroughly, listening to her lungs, checking her temperature, asking questions about symptoms. His gentle manner put her at ease even through the fever haze. Acute bronchitis, he finally said, pulling medication from his bag. Bacterial infection requiring antibiotics. She'll also need a nebulizer treatment, which I'll administer now. The fever should break within 24 hours once the antibiotics take effect. I can't pay you, I admitted, shame burning through me. Not right now. But I can set up a payment plan. Mr. Castellano has taken care of all expenses. Dr. Howard interrupted gently. My only concern is your daughter's health. He stayed for an hour, setting up the nebulizer, showing me how to administer the antibiotics, leaving enough medication for a full course of treatment. Before he left, he handed me his card. If her condition worsens, or you have any concerns, call me directly, day or night. After he left, I sat on the edge of Ruby's bed, watching her breathe easier for the first time in days. and cried. Vincent had sent his personal physician to my apartment without being asked, had paid for everything without expecting anything in return. Every instinct screamed that men like him always wanted something, but I was too grateful to care. When I returned to work Monday morning, Mrs. Vanetti's expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Castellano wishes to see you in his office before you begin your duties." My stomach dropped. I'd missed 2 days without notice. He was going to fire me. Vincent's office was on the second floor, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds. He stood behind his desk when I entered, wearing a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. "How's Ruby?" he asked before I could apologize. "Better. The antibiotics worked. Dr. Howard was incredible." I twisted my hands together. "I'm sorry I didn't call. My phone was disconnected and I didn't know how to reach you. You have nothing to apologize for." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. We need to discuss something." I sat, pulse hammering. "I've arranged for Ruby to attend Riverside Academy," he said, pulling a folder from his desk. "It's a private preschool 15 minutes from here. They have an excellent program, full-day care, and a nurse on staff. You've been granted a full scholarship through the Castellano Foundation." "I can't accept that," I whispered, even though every part of me wanted to. "You can, and you will. The foundation provides scholarships to children of employees. You qualify." His eyes held mine. "Ruby deserves stability and quality education. This gives her both." "Why are you doing this? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because no child should suffer for their parents' circumstances. And because watching you sacrifice everything for your daughter reminds me that not all parents are like mine." The honesty in his voice cracked something open in my chest. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. Continue being the mother Ruby needs. That's payment enough." I left his office with tears in my eyes and enrollment paperwork in my hands. Ruby started at Riverside the following Monday. And for the first time since she was born, I didn't spend every working hour terrified something would happen to her. But Vincent's generosity had consequences I didn't anticipate. Sophia's rage was a living thing after she discovered what he'd done. I was cleaning the second-floor hallway when I heard Dr. Howard's voice drifting from Vincent's office. He was on the phone, discussing the Bennett child's follow-up appointment with someone. Sophia stood outside the office door, her face white with fury. When Dr. Howard emerged minutes later, she cornered him. "The girl who works here, her daughter was ill?" "Yes, Mrs. Castellano. Bronchitis, fully recovered now." "And my husband arranged treatment personally?" "He did. Excellent timing, too. Another day and the child would have needed hospitalization." After Dr. Howard left, Sophia's eyes found me where I stood frozen in the hallway. The hatred in her gaze made my blood run cold. She said nothing, just smiled and walked away. But I knew that silence was more dangerous than any words. Vincent left for Chicago the next morning. Some negotiation that required his personal attention. He'd be gone 10 days, maybe longer. Before he left, he pulled me aside. "If you need anything while I'm gone, contact James directly." He handed me a card with a phone number. "He's head of security and will handle any issues that arise." "I'll be fine," I assured him, not understanding the concern in his eyes. "I mean it, Lara. Anything at all." Then he was gone, and the mansion felt different without his presence. Colder somehow, despite the summer heat. Sophia waited exactly 2 days before making her move. She started with small cruelties, spilling wine on the Persian rug in the formal living room, then demanding I clean it immediately with solutions that were clearly wrong for the fabric, tearing down curtains in the guest wing and claiming I'd washed them incorrectly, damaging the delicate fabric, accusing me of stealing a diamond bracelet that mysteriously reappeared in her jewelry box 3 days later, but only after she'd threatened to call the police. Maria and June watched with worried eyes but said nothing. They had families too, bills to pay. I understood their silence even as it isolated me further. The breaking point came on Thursday afternoon. Sophia called me to the kitchen where she was preparing tea. The staff chef had the day off, leaving just the two of us in the massive space. "You think you're clever," she said conversationally, her back to me as she filled the kettle. "Seducing my husband with your pathetic victim routine." "I haven't seduced anyone, ma'am. Don't lie to me." She turned, and the fury in her blue eyes stole my breath. Vincent hasn't touched me in 8 months. But suddenly there's you, with your sad eyes and sick daughter, and he can't stop playing hero. Mrs. Castellano, I swear I don't care what you did or didn't do. She lifted the kettle from the stove, steam rising from the spout. I care that you've made me look like a fool in my own house. Everything happened too fast. One moment she was across the kitchen, the next she was in front of me. And then boiling water was hitting my left forearm in a cascade of agony. I screamed, stumbling backward, clutching my arm as pain exploded through every nerve. Through the haze of shock, I heard footsteps, saw Maria and June frozen in the doorway. Clumsy girl, Sophia said coldly, setting the kettle down. You should be more careful in the kitchen, Mrs. Castellano, Maria gasped. You threw that at her. Did I? Sophia's voice was ice. Because if you say that to anyone, Maria, you'll find yourself unemployed. You too, June. And I'll make certain neither of you ever work in this city again. She turned her cold gaze on me. Lara understands, don't you? Accidents happen. And if anyone asks, especially Mr. Castellano, this was an accident. Your clumsiness. Your fault. My arm was already blistering, the pain so intense I could barely stand. But Ruby's face flashed through my mind. The rent I couldn't pay. The food I couldn't buy. The life I couldn't provide without this job. Yes, ma'am, I whispered. An accident. Good girl. Sophia smiled, terrifying in its sweetness. Now clean up this mess and get back to work. We wouldn't want Mr. Castellano to think you're lazy. I made it home that night through sheer willpower. The burn covered my entire left forearm, angry red with fluid-filled blisters. I bought supplies at a 24-hour pharmacy, antiseptic and bandages and pain medication I couldn't afford, and treated it myself in the bathroom while Ruby slept. The next morning, I wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the heat wave. The fabric stuck to the bandages, and every movement sent fresh waves of pain through my arm. But I showed up for work on time. Because the alternative was losing everything, Sophia watched me with cold satisfaction, and I understood that Vincent's protection only extended as far as his presence. Without him, I was just another target in her line of fire, and she'd made it clear that any attempt to tell him the truth would cost me more than just my job. So I stayed silent, changed the bandages in bathroom stalls, and counted down the days until Vincent's return. The burn got worse, infection setting in despite my careful treatment. But I hid it, because I'd learned long ago that survival meant swallowing pain and keeping secrets. Jake had taught me that lesson with cigarettes and knives. Sophia had just reminded me I'd never truly escaped. Vincent returned on a Wednesday morning, 10 days after he'd left. I was polishing silver in the dining room when I heard his voice in the foyer, low and controlled as he spoke with Mrs. Vanetti. Every instinct screamed to hide, but there was nowhere to go. He found me within the hour. I was reaching up to dust the top of a cabinet when pain lanced through my infected arm, and I couldn't suppress the sharp intake of breath. When I turned around, Vincent stood in the doorway, still wearing his travel clothes, dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my pulse stutter. You're favoring your left arm, he observed. Just a little sore from work. Nothing serious. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and I instinctively stepped back, bumping into the cabinet. His jaw tightened at my retreat, but his voice remained calm. Show me. Sir, I'm fine. That wasn't a request, Lara. His tone left no room for argument. Show me your arm. My hands trembled as I slowly rolled up my sleeve, revealing the soiled bandage. The skin around it was inflamed, red streaks radiating outward in a clear sign of spreading infection. Vincent's expression went absolutely still, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Who did this to you? It was an accident. I was clumsy in the kitchen. Don't lie to me. Each word was precise. Controlled fury barely contained. I've seen enough injuries to know the difference between an accident and an attack. This is a splash burn. Someone threw boiling water at you. I couldn't meet his eyes. Please just let it go. Take off the bandage. Mr. Castellano. Now! With shaking fingers, I peeled away the dirty gauze. The burn was horrific, blistered and weeping, infection turning the edges a dangerous shade of red. It was nothing like the scars on my back and shoulders. those white textured marks from Jake's cigarettes and knife. This was fresh, angry, still bleeding poison into my system. Vincent stared at the wound for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. "James, my office. Now. And bring the first aid kit from security." He ended the call and looked at me. "Come with me. I have work. Now, Lara." I followed him to his office, where he gestured for me to sit. James arrived within minutes, a tall man in his 40s with military bearing, carrying a comprehensive medical kit. "Dr. Howard will be here in 20 minutes, Vincent said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "James, I need you to bring Maria and June here, separately, and I want it done quietly." Understanding flickered across James's face. "Yes, sir." While we waited for the doctor, Vincent cleaned my wound himself with supplies from the kit. His hands were surprisingly gentle despite the tension radiating from his frame. When he touched the burned flesh, I hissed in pain, and his eyes flashed dark. "This should have been treated immediately," he said. "It's badly infected. You could have lost the arm if it spread further. I couldn't afford a doctor. You could have called me. You were in Chicago. And your wife made it very clear that calling you would have consequences." His hands stilled. "Sophia did this. It wasn't a question, but I couldn't confirm it. Not yet. Not when I was still so afraid." Dr. Howard arrived, took one look at my arm, and immediately began treatment. He cleaned the wound properly, applied antibiotic ointment, administered an injection. "This is a second-degree burn with significant infection," he said, wrapping clean gauze around my forearm. "Another few days and you'd be looking at hospitalization or worse." "Who treated this initially?" "I did," I admitted. "Drugstore supplies." "And the burn itself?" I glanced at Vincent, whose expression could have been carved from stone. "An accident in the kitchen. Boiling water doesn't accidentally hit someone in a pattern this precise." Dr. Howard closed his bag. "But that's not my concern. My concern is preventing sepsis. You'll need oral antibiotics for 2 weeks, pain medication, and daily wound care. I'll return tomorrow to check progress." After he left, James brought Maria first. The young woman looked terrified as she entered Vincent's office. "Maria," Vincent said quietly, "I need you to tell me what happened in the kitchen last Thursday. The truth. You won't face any consequences for honesty." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Castellano, I can't." "You can, and you will, because if you don't, and Lara loses her arm to infection, you'll carry that responsibility." The words were brutal, but effective. Maria broke. "Mrs. Castellano threw the kettle at Lara," she whispered. "The water was boiling. She did it on purpose because she was angry about Ruby's treatment. Then she threatened to fire all of us and ruin our careers if we told you." Vincent's expression didn't change, but the air in the room turned glacial. "Thank you, Maria. You may go. And Maria, you won't lose your position here." June's testimony matched Maria's exactly. 2 witnesses confirming what I'd refused to admit. After June left, Vincent turned to me. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost uncertain. "I need to see the other scars," he said softly. "The ones you've been hiding since you started working here." "Why?" "Because I need to understand what happened to you before I can protect you from it happening again." Slowly, I pulled down the collar of my shirt, revealing the edge of a cigarette burn on my shoulder. Then I turned, lifting the fabric to show him my back. The textured white scars from Jake's cigarettes formed a constellation of old pain, interspersed with a longer line where he'd cut me with a knife. Vincent's fingers traced one of the scars with heartbreaking gentleness. "Who?" "Ruby's father, Jake. When I told him I was pregnant, he said I had 2 choices, abortion or consequences. I chose Ruby." My voice cracked. "He burned me to convince me I'd made the wrong choice. When that didn't work, he used a knife. Where is he now?" "I don't know. I got a restraining order 2 years ago. He violated it twice before disappearing. I assume he moved on to someone else." Vincent circled back to face me, his dark eyes burning with controlled rage. "Give me his full name." "Jake Morrison, but I'll handle it." He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his gaze. "I need you to understand something, Lara. No one will hurt you again. Not Sophia. Not Jake. Not anyone. Do you believe me? I wanted to. God, I wanted to so badly. You can't protect me from everything. Watch me. He released me and pressed a button on his desk phone. Mrs. Vanetti, have Sophia come to my office immediately. Sir, what are you going to do? What I should have done months ago. For the next 3 days, Vincent moved like a man possessed. I didn't see most of what happened, but I heard whispers from the staff. He'd hired a private investigator who'd uncovered a pattern of abuse stretching back years. Other staff members Sophia had hurt, complaints that had been buried, incidents swept under expensive rugs. He reviewed the prenuptial agreement with lawyers, looking for any clause that would allow dissolution without triggering a war with the Harrington family. And he dug into the Harringtons themselves, finding things that made even his hardened security team uncomfortable. I continued working, arm bandaged and healing, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. It arrived on Saturday night. I was preparing to leave when Mrs. Vanetti found me. Mr. Castellano requests you remain in the house tonight. There's a guest room prepared for you on the second floor. Why? She hesitated. He's meeting with Mrs. Castellano. He wants you safe inside. The storm rolled in as darkness fell, rain hammering against the windows with violent intensity. Thunder shook the foundations of the mansion, and lightning turned the grounds into stark snapshots of illuminated garden and shadow. From my assigned room, I heard raised voices. Then Sophia's heels clicking on marble, rapid and angry. A door slamming. More voices. Vincent's cold and controlled. Sophia's rising to a shriek I couldn't make out individual words. Then silence, broken only by rain and thunder. An hour later, I watched from the window as Sophia emerged from the house, dragging a suitcase through the downpour. A car waited for her, engine running. She threw her luggage in the trunk and climbed inside without looking back. The vehicle disappeared down the long driveway, taillights swallowed by rain and darkness. Someone knocked softly on my door. Vincent stood there, still dressed formally, hair slightly disheveled, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. She's gone, he said simply. She won't be returning. What did you do? He entered the room, leaving the door open for propriety's sake. I gave her a choice. Sign divorce papers and leave quietly, or I expose evidence that her family's art gallery is a front for laundering cartel money. The Harringtons will negotiate the divorce terms, or they'll deal with federal investigation and cartel retribution simultaneously. You'd really do that? For you? His eyes held mine. I'd burn this entire city down. The declaration should have terrified me. Instead, warmth flooded through my chest, dangerous and intoxicating. Your arm, he continued, crossing to where I stood. May I see? I held out my bandaged forearm. He unwrapped it carefully, examining the healing burn. The infection had cleared thanks to Dr. Howard's treatment, the wound already beginning to close. These scars will fade, he said quietly, his fingers tracing the edge of the healing burn. But the ones on your back won't. I know. I've made peace with that. Have you? He looked up, his dark eyes searching mine. Because you wear long sleeves in summer and flinch when people move too quickly. That's not peace, Lara. That's survival. Tears pricked my eyes. What else can I do? Let me help you move beyond survival into something better. His hand moved to my shoulder, fingertips barely touching one of Jake's cigarette scars through my shirt. Let me show you what protection really means. And what does it mean? It means no one touches you without consequences. It means your daughter grows up safe. It means you never have to choose between dignity and a paycheck again. He paused. It means I will hunt down every person who's ever hurt you and ensure they understand the depth of their mistake. Jake is already being located. Once I have him, he'll disappear. Permanently. You'll never need to fear him again. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt only relief. And that scared me more than anything. What do you want from me in return? Nothing you're not ready to give. He stepped back, putting careful distance between us. Rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss what comes next. He left, and I stood alone in the guest room, listening to rain hammer the windows. Sophia was gone. Jake would soon follow. Vincent had systematically removed every threat from my life with ruthless efficiency. And I was beginning to realize that the most dangerous thing in my world wasn't Sophia's cruelty or Jake's violence. It was the way Vincent Castellano had become the first man I'd ever truly wanted to trust. The week after Sophia left felt surreal. Vincent moved Ruby and me into a suite on the second floor, 3 rooms with views of the gardens and more space than our entire apartment had contained. Mrs. Vanetti stopped giving me cleaning assignments, and when I protested, Vincent was firm. "You're not staff anymore, Lara. You're under my protection, which means you're a guest here. I can't just live here for free." "You won't. You'll help me understand what Ruby needs, what makes you both comfortable. That's worth more than dusting shelves." So I became something undefined, not quite staff, definitely not family, existing in a strange limbo, while Vincent navigated divorce negotiations with the Harrington family. They pushed back hard initially, threatening everything from business sabotage to political exposure. Vincent responded by offering them 3 valuable port territories in exchange for a clean separation with no contest. They refused, and tensions escalated. "They're trying to make me choose between keeping my word to you and maintaining peace with a powerful family," Vincent explained one evening over dinner. He'd insisted we eat together, just him, Ruby, and me, in the small dining room rather than the formal space. "They don't understand I've already made that choice." Ruby was focused on her pasta, completely oblivious to the adult conversation. She'd adjusted to life in the mansion with the easy resilience of children, though she still asked when we'd go home to our apartment. I didn't know how to tell her we might never leave. "What if they start a war?" I asked quietly. "Then I'll end it." His eyes met mine across the table. "You and Ruby are worth more than any business alliance." The certainty in his voice still unnerved me, even after weeks of experiencing his protection. I'd spent so long believing I was worthless that having someone assign me value felt like a trick, a trap I couldn't quite identify. But Vincent was patient. He courted me with small gestures, books he thought I'd enjoy appearing on my nightstand, piano music drifting from the music room because he'd remembered I used to play, quiet evenings where we talked for hours about everything and nothing. He never pushed for physical intimacy beyond occasional touches, my hand in his fingers brushing my cheek, giving me space to heal at my own pace. Ruby adored him. She'd started calling him Mr. Vin, and demanded he read her bedtime stories. I'd watch from the doorway as this dangerous man sat on the edge of her small bed, his deep voice gentle as he brought fairy tales to life. He taught her to play chess with surprising patience, celebrated when she won her first game, let her paint his nails bright pink when she asked. Maria and June treated me with cautious respect now, grateful I'd survived Sophia's wrath and inadvertently freed them from her tyranny. Mrs. Vanetti remained professionally neutral, but had started asking my preferences for meals, a subtle acknowledgement of my changed status. 3 weeks after Sophia's expulsion, the situation with the Harringtons reached a breaking point. Vincent's lawyer delivered an ultimatum: accept the divorce terms, or face simultaneous federal investigation and cartel retaliation for their money laundering operation. The Harringtons doubled down, hiring mercenaries to send a message about their displeasure. The attack came on a Tuesday afternoon. Ruby had a routine pediatric appointment, nothing urgent, just a checkup Dr. Howard had scheduled. James and another guard named Tom accompanied us to the private clinic Vincent used, driving a bulletproof SUV that felt excessive until it suddenly wasn't. We were in the parking lot, Ruby holding my hand and chattering about the stickers Dr. Howard always gave her, when a black vehicle blocked our path. 3 men emerged, weapons visible, and everything happened too fast. James shoved me and Ruby toward our vehicle. "Get down!" Gunfire cracked through the air. Tom threw himself over Ruby and me as we hit the floor of the SUV, his body shielding us from the chaos outside. Through the confusion, I heard James returning fire, heard tires screeching as more vehicles arrived. Ruby was screaming, terrified, and I held her against my chest, trying to cover her ears while my own heart hammered with pure terror. It lasted 4 minutes that felt like hours. When silence finally fell, broken only by Ruby's sobs, Tom carefully lifted his weight off us. "Stay down until I confirm it's clear," he ordered. Through the window, I could see one attacker dead on the pavement, blood pooling beneath him. The other 2 had fled, leaving their fallen companion behind. James was on his phone, calling for backup and medical, blood dripping from a graze on his shoulder. Vincent arrived 8 minutes later, his vehicle barely stopping before he was out and wrenching open our door. He lifted Ruby from my arms with heartbreaking gentleness, holding her close as she clung to him, her small body shaking with fear. "You're safe now, Piccola," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you. Nobody's going to hurt you." His eyes met mine over Ruby's head, and the raw fury there stole my breath. Someone had tried to take what was his, and they would pay dearly for it. We were driven straight back to the mansion, where Dr. Howard examined Ruby for injuries. Physically, she was fine. Emotionally was another matter. She wouldn't let go of Vincent, and he carried her around the rest of the evening, whispering reassurances in Italian and English, until she finally fell asleep against his shoulder. After we'd tucked her into bed, Vincent led me to his office. James was already there, along with 2 other men I didn't recognize. The attackers were mercenaries, James reported, hired by the Harrington family 3 days ago. We've identified the 2 who escaped. They're being located now. Vincent's expression was carved from ice. "What's our exposure on the Harrington evidence?" "Ready to deploy on your order, sir. FBI contact is waiting, and our cartel intermediary confirms they'd be very interested to learn about the missing $2 million. I listened in growing horror as Vincent orchestrated a 2-front attack on the Harrington family. He wasn't just going to expose their crimes. He was going to destroy them completely. "Do it," Vincent ordered. "Full deployment. I want the FBI at their door by morning and the cartel informed by midnight." "Sir, that's final." His voice allowed no argument. "They tried to take my family. There are no second chances for that." The men left to execute his orders, and Vincent poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handing me one with steady hands. My own were still shaking. "They went after Ruby," I whispered. "She's 4 years old." "I know, and they'll spend the rest of their very short lives regretting that choice." He downed his bourbon in one swallow. "The Harringtons will face federal charges by morning. The cartel will handle the rest. By the end of the week, they'll agree to any terms I offer just to make it stop. You're destroying an entire family. They tried to kill my daughter." The possessiveness in those words wrapped around my heart. "What would you have me do, Lara? Show mercy to people who would hurt a child to make a point?" I had no answer because he was right. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The next 72 hours were brutal. The FBI raided Harrington properties at dawn, seizing records and making arrests. The cartel, learning about the stolen money, sent their own message in ways that made even Vincent's men uncomfortable to discuss. The Harrington family imploded under pressure from 2 directions, their carefully constructed criminal empire collapsing like a house of cards. On Friday morning, they accepted Vincent's terms. Full, uncontested divorce. $5 million in compensation for the attack. Complete severing of all business ties. In exchange, Vincent withdrew his cooperation with the FBI, keeping the evidence as insurance, and negotiated a fragile peace with the cartel on their behalf. The war was over before it really began, ended by Vincent's ruthless efficiency and complete willingness to destroy anyone who threatened what he'd claimed as his. That evening, after Ruby was asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Vincent found me in the library. I was attempting to read, but mostly just staring at pages without comprehending words. "Thank you," I said when he sat beside me, "for protecting us, for ending this. You don't need to thank me for protecting what's mine." "Is that what we are? Yours?" He took the book from my hands, setting it aside, and turned to face me fully. "I want you to be, not because you're dependent on me or scared to leave, but because you choose to stay. Choose me. I'm broken, Vincent. I'm 26 with more scars than memories of being touched without pain. I have a daughter by a man who tried to burn the humanity out of me. What could you possibly want with someone like me?" His hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. "I want the woman who kept her daughter fed even when it meant going hungry herself, who survived torture and came out determined to build something better, who looks at me like I'm a man rather than a monster." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "You're not broken, Lara. You're a survivor, and I find that infinitely more compelling than perfection." Tears spilled over, and he brushed them away with careful fingers. "I'm scared," I admitted. scared that this is too good, that it'll be taken away, that I'll wake up and find out I imagined all of it. Then let me prove it's real. He leaned forward slowly, giving me time to retreat, and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle, questioning, nothing like the violent possession I'd experienced with Jake. Vincent kissed me like I was precious, like he had all the time in the world to learn what made me sigh, what made me melt. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you since I found you crying in the pantry and wanted to destroy the world for making you hurt. Say you'll stay. Say you'll let me love you properly." "I'm terrified," I whispered. "I know, but say it anyway." So I did. "I'll stay." And when he kissed me again, deeper this time, I finally let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, surviving had led me somewhere worth reaching, somewhere safe, somewhere home. The months following our first kiss were a study in patience. Vincent courted me like I was something fragile, always giving me space to retreat, never pushing beyond what I could handle. He understood my triggers instinctively, the way sudden movements made me flinch, how raised voices sent me into shutdown mode, how I couldn't stand being cornered in small spaces. He adjusted, moved slowly, gave me room to breathe, showed me through 1,000 small actions that not all strength was meant to break things. Ruby flourished under his attention. She'd started calling him Papa in September, tentatively at first, watching his face for rejection. Instead, he'd swept her into his arms and held her close, his voice thick when he said, "Say it again, Piccola." "Papa?" she'd repeated, and he'd nodded, something raw and vulnerable crossing his features. "That's right. I'm your papa now." Watching them together cracked open places in my heart I'd thought permanently sealed. Vincent taught Ruby to ride a bike on the mansion grounds, running beside her with patient encouragement. Took her fishing in the lake and didn't care when she caught more than he did. Read her stories every night without fail, doing voices for all the characters until she giggled herself breathless. He loved her, not because he had to, not because she came attached to me, but genuinely, completely, and she loved him back with the uncomplicated devotion only children could offer. The adoption papers were filed in October. Vincent's lawyer handled everything, and the judge who presided over the hearing seemed unsurprised by the whole arrangement. When it was finalized, Ruby Bennett became Ruby Castellano, legally and permanently. "Nobody can take her from you now," Vincent told me afterward, holding the official documentation. "Not her biological father, not social services if something happened to you. She's mine to protect, always." I cried in the courthouse bathroom, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude and the terrifying depth of my feelings for this man who'd systematically dismantled every wall I'd built around my heart. Vincent's divorce from Sophia was finalized in mid-September. The Harrington family, still reeling from federal investigations and cartel pressure, had signed without contest. Sophia herself had vanished, her own family reportedly refusing contact after the disaster she'd brought down on them. The day the divorce became official, Vincent took me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant he'd rented out entirely. Just us, candlelight, and food that tasted like childhood memories I'd never had. "I have something for you," he said after dessert, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. My heart stopped. "Vincent, let me finish." He opened the box, revealing a ring unlike anything I'd expected. The center stone was an emerald, my birthstone, surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light. Simple but elegant, nothing ostentatious. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. I'm asking if you'll consider eventually becoming my wife, when you're ready, when the idea doesn't terrify you. What if I'm never ready? Then I'll keep asking until you are, or until I die, whichever comes first." His dark eyes held mine. "But I think you'll be ready sooner than you believe, because you're braver than you give yourself credit for." I took the ring, slid it onto my finger, and watched it catch the candlelight. "Ask me again in December." Relief and joy flooded his expression. "December? December," I confirmed. "That gives me 2 months to get used to the idea of being Vincent Castellano's wife. And if you change your mind?" "I won't." The certainty surprised me, but it was real. I've spent my whole life running from dangerous men. It's time I stopped running and started choosing. I choose you. He kissed me there in the empty restaurant. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly safe. The weeks leading to December were the happiest I'd ever known. Vincent continued teaching me that protection didn't mean possession, that strength could be gentle, that power was meaningless without something worth protecting. We built a life together, the three of us. Something that looked almost normal despite the armed guards and the business dealings I didn't ask about. Then, 1 week before our planned wedding, Sophia returned. It was a Wednesday evening. Vincent was in a meeting in his office. Ruby was with Mrs. Vanetti baking cookies, and I was alone in the library. I didn't hear her enter until she spoke. "You look comfortable." I spun to find Sophia standing in the doorway, soaked from rain, her hair plastered to her skull, eyes wild with something beyond rage, beyond reason. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, standing slowly. "I lived here for 5 years. I know every entrance, every guard rotation, every weakness." She pulled a revolver from her coat pocket, and my blood turned to ice. "Did you really think I'd let you have everything that was supposed to be mine?" "Sophia, put the gun down. Vincent will what? Save you? He's 3 floors away in a soundproof office. Nobody's coming, Lara. It's just you and me, and the reckoning you've earned." She advanced into the room, and I backed toward the windows, trying to keep distance between us. My mind raced through options. The door was behind her. The windows didn't open. My phone was on the table across the room. "I gave him everything," Sophia continued, her voice breaking. 5 years of playing the perfect wife, hosting his associates, maintaining appearances. I convinced myself he'd eventually love me. That patience would pay off. The gun shook in her hand. Then you arrived with your pathetic sob story and your bastard daughter, and suddenly he couldn't see anyone else. I never asked for any of this. You didn't have to ask. You just existed, all wounded and vulnerable, triggering his savior complex. She laughed, a brittle sound. "Do you know what it's like watching your husband fall in love with someone else? Watching him look at her the way he never looked at you? Sophia, please. Ruby is upstairs. Whatever you want to do to me, don't do it where she might see. Ruby." Sophia's face twisted. The perfect little replacement daughter. I couldn't even give him children. Another failure to add to my list. But it doesn't matter now. Once you're gone, once that brat is gone, maybe he'll finally see me again. She raised the gun, aiming at my chest, and something in me snapped. I'd spent years being Jake's victim, letting Sophia torment me, making myself small to survive, but I wouldn't die passive. Not when Ruby needed me. Not when I'd finally found something worth fighting for. I grabbed the bronze bookend from the nearby shelf and hurled it at Sophia's hand. The impact knocked the gun from her grip, sending it skittering across the floor. She lunged for it, but I was faster, driven by pure maternal instinct. I tackled her, and we crashed into a side table in a tangle of limbs and fury. Sophia was taller, but I fought with the desperate strength of someone who'd survived Jake's fists and cigarettes. When she clawed at my face, I caught her wrist and twisted. When she tried to knee me, I rolled, using her momentum against her. We struggled for the gun, both reaching for it, and I managed to kick it away under a bookshelf. Sophia screamed in frustration and slammed her fist into my ribs, driving the air from my lungs. Pain exploded through my chest, but I didn't let go, grabbing a fistful of her wet hair and pulling hard. The library door crashed open. Vincent appeared, James right behind him, both with weapons drawn. Vincent's eyes took in the scene instantly, me and Sophia on the floor, the revolver visible under the bookshelf, my split lip bleeding. In 2 strides, he had Sophia pinned to the floor, his knee on her back, movements controlled and efficient. She struggled briefly before going limp, sobbing. "I loved you," she gasped. "I loved you and you threw me away for her." "You never loved me," Vincent said coldly. "You loved what I represented, and the moment you hurt what's mine, you forfeited any consideration I might have shown you." James secured Sophia with zip ties while Vincent came to me, his hands gentle as they checked for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did she—" "I'm okay. Bruised ribs, split lip, But okay. I was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. She said she was going to kill Ruby too, to make you see her again. Vincent's expression went absolutely lethal. He turned to Sophia, who was being hauled to her feet by James. You threatened my daughter. She's not your daughter. Sophia spat. She's some criminal's bastard that you're playing house with. She's mine because I chose her. Just like Lara is mine because I chose her. You? I was forced to marry you for politics. You were never a choice. He pulled out his phone. James, call the police. Full charges, breaking and entering, attempted murder, terrorist threats. I want her in prison. Vincent, the Harringtons, are already destroyed and have no leverage left. She's going to prison, and if she ever comes near my family again, she won't leave alive. The police arrived within 15 minutes. Sophia was arrested, the gun collected as evidence, and statements taken from all of us. Through it all, Vincent kept me close, one arm around my waist, anchoring me through the chaos. After the police left with Sophia in custody, Vincent pulled me into his office and just held me. I buried my face in his chest and let the tears come, releasing the terror and rage and relief in equal measure. I fought back, I whispered against his shirt. I didn't just let it happen. I fought. I know. His hand stroked through my hair. You were incredible. Terrifying and incredible. Is that what you want? Someone who fights? I want you, Lara, however you come. Fighter or survivor or both. He pulled back to look at me. But seeing you defend yourself and Ruby, seeing you refuse to be a victim, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Ruby burst into the office moments later, Mrs. Vanetti following apologetically. Mama. Papa said there was an accident. Are you okay? I knelt, ignoring my bruised ribs, and pulled her close. I'm fine, baby. Everything's fine now. Vincent joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us, and we stayed there on the floor of his office, a family forged from trauma and choice, and stubborn refusal to let darkness win. Sophia was sentenced to 12 years for attempted murder. The Harrington family, what remained of it after federal prosecution and cartel retribution, refused to pay for her defense. She'd burned every bridge, and nobody was willing to risk Vincent's wrath to save her. Our wedding took place the following Saturday as planned, in the mansion's garden under December sunshine. Ruby wore lavender and carried flowers, beaming as she walked down the aisle ahead of me. Maria, June, and Mrs. Vanetti attended, along with Vincent's closest associates and Dr. Howard. I wore ivory, simple and elegant, my hair loose in waves. When Vincent saw me approaching, something in his expression cracked open, revealing the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. He met me halfway down the aisle, unable to wait, and took my hand. You're sure? He whispered. Just for me. Completely. The ceremony was intimate and emotional. I promised to trust him with the heart I'd thought was permanently broken. He promised to protect, honor, and love both Ruby and me for the rest of his life. When we kissed, Ruby cheered, and the small gathering applauded. The reception was joyful, full of genuine celebration. For the first time in my life, I danced without fear, laughed without reservation, allowed myself to be completely, utterly happy. 6 years later, I stood on the same garden terrace, 7 months pregnant with our son, watching Ruby teach tricks to the dog we'd adopted. She was 10 now, confident and bright, fluent in 3 languages and excelling at piano. She called Vincent Papa without hesitation, and had his same intensity when she focused on something she cared about. Vincent joined me, sliding an arm around my waist, his hand resting on my swollen belly where our son kicked active protests against the confines of my body. He's restless today, I observed. He gets that from you. Vincent pressed a kiss to my temple. What are you thinking about? How far we've come? How different life is now? My scars were still there, the white textured marks on my back and shoulders from Jake's cigarettes and knife, the faded line on my arm from Sophia's boiling water. But they didn't define me anymore. I'd survived Jake's violence and Sophia's cruelty and my own fear, and come out the other side into something I never thought possible. Vincent wasn't perfect. His business still operated in shadows. His enemies still disappeared. His reputation remained dangerous, but with us, with his family, he was gentle and present and devoted. "I love you," he murmured against my hair. "Both of you. All three of you now. We love you too." Ruby's laughter rang across the garden, pure and joyful, and I realized this was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of choice, the ability to take broken pieces and build something beautiful from the wreckage. I'd been the maid in the Mafia boss's mansion, the woman with secrets carved into her skin. Now I was his wife, the mother of his children, the survivor who'd stopped running and started living. And that was more than I'd ever dared to hope for.